I never thought I'd be the kind of mother who would search through her teenage daughter's room. That's what I told myself as I stood frozen in Emma's doorway, staring at the tiny black device nestled between her stuffed animals on the shelf above her bed. The camera lens caught the afternoon light filtering through her curtains, winking at me like it was mocking everything I thought I knew about my family. The discovery happened on a Tuesday in October, the kind of crisp autumn day that usually made me feel hopeful about new beginnings. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I was supposed to be at work, teaching my afternoon chemistry classes at Riverside High School, but Emma had texted me during lunch claiming she was sick and needed to come home. As a single mother who'd been raising her alone since my divorce 3 years ago, I'd developed a sixth sense about her lies. This felt like one of them. I'd driven home during my prep period, expecting to find her perfectly healthy and probably on her phone or sneaking around with her boyfriend Jake. What I found instead was an empty house, Emma's car gone from the driveway, and her bedroom looking like it had been hastily straightened. Too hastily. Emma was many things, but neat wasn't one of them. Her usual controlled chaos of clothes, books, and art supplies had been arranged with the kind of precision that only comes from panic. That's when I noticed the stuffed elephant was facing the wrong direction. It sounds ridiculous, but I knew that elephant, Mr. Peanuts, better than most people knew their own family members. Emma had slept with him every night from age 3 to 13, and even now at 17, he held a place of honor on her shelf. He always faced toward the bed, watching over her like a fabric guardian. Today he was turned toward the wall. I walked over to fix him, thinking maybe Emma had bumped into the shelf that morning, and that's when I saw it. Nestled in the space where Mr. Peanuts usually sat, partially hidden by her collection of vintage books, was a small black rectangle no bigger than a matchbox. At first I thought it was some kind of phone charger or maybe a small speaker, but as I picked it up, my blood ran cold. It was a camera, a hidden camera with a memory card slot and what looked like a wireless transmission capability. My hands started shaking as the implications hit me. Someone had been recording my daughter in her most private moments. Someone had violated her sanctuary, the one place where she should feel completely safe. The rage that followed was unlike anything I'd ever experienced, white-hot and consuming, making my vision blur at the edges. I sat down hard on Emma's bed, still clutching the camera, and tried to think rationally. Who had access to this house? Who could have planted this without us knowing? The list was shorter than I wanted it to be, which made it infinitely more terrifying. My ex-husband David lived across town with his new wife Patricia, but he had keys from when we shared custody arrangements. My brother Michael helped with household repairs and had borrowed keys multiple times. Patricia's teenage son Ryan spent time here when David picked up Emma for their father-daughter dinners, but thinking logically wasn't stopping the panic attack that was building in my chest. I called Emma immediately, my fingers fumbling with the phone as I dialed her number. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again, same thing. The third time she answered with that particular tone teenagers use when they're annoyed at being caught. "Mom, I'm fine. I'm at the library studying with Chloe. We grabbed some soup first because I was feeling better. You don't need to check on me constantly." The lie rolled off her tongue so smoothly that it almost impressed me. Almost. But I was holding evidence of something much bigger than a skipped school day, and suddenly her small deception felt like the least of my problems. "Emma, I need you to come home. Now, there's something we need to discuss. Can't it wait until tonight? I'm really in the middle of something important here." "No, it cannot wait. Come home now, or I'm coming to find you, and trust me, you don't want me showing up wherever you actually are right now." The silence on the other end stretched long enough that I could hear other voices in the background. Definitely not the library. 20 minutes later, Emma's car pulled into the driveway, and I watched from the kitchen window as she sat in the driver's seat for a full minute, probably preparing whatever story she thought would get her out of trouble. She walked in wearing the face she always wore when she'd been caught doing something she shouldn't, a mixture of defiance and practiced innocence that had gotten her through countless teenage mishaps. But when she saw me sitting at the kitchen table with the camera placed directly in front of me like evidence in a courtroom, her expression shifted to something I'd never seen before. Pure terror. Mom, where did you find that? Her voice was barely above a whisper, and she was backing toward the door like she might run. In that moment, I realized something that made my stomach drop. She knew about the camera, she'd known about it and hadn't told me. Emma, sit down. We need to talk, and we need to talk now. She remained standing, her eyes fixed on the device like it might explode. I need to explain something first. You're going to be really upset, and I don't want you to do anything crazy before you hear the whole story. The whole story. That phrase echoed in my head as I studied my daughter's face, looking for clues about what kind of nightmare I'd stumbled into. Emma was many things: stubborn, dramatic, occasionally dishonest about curfews and homework, but she wasn't cruel or manipulative. If she was protecting someone who had violated her privacy, there had to be a reason. Emma, honey, someone put a camera in your room. Someone has been watching you, recording you. Do you understand how serious this is? We need to call the police immediately. No, the word came out sharp and panicked. Mom, please, you can't call the police. You don't understand the situation. If you call them, everything will be ruined. Everything. I stared at my daughter, this young woman I'd given birth to and raised and thought I knew better than anyone else in the world, and realized I was looking at a stranger. The Emma I knew would be terrified and outraged about a hidden camera. She'd want whoever did this prosecuted to the full extent of the law. This Emma was protecting someone. Who did this, Emma? Who put this camera in your room? She sat down finally, but on the edge of the chair like she might bolt at any second. It's complicated, Mom. You're going to think terrible things about people, and it's not what it looks like. What it looks like is that someone has been committing a serious crime against my underage daughter, so unless you have a very good explanation for why that's not the case, I'm calling Detective Morrison right now. Detective Morrison had been the officer who handled our break-in 2 years ago, and Emma knew I had his card pinned to the refrigerator. She also knew I wasn't bluffing about calling him. It was Dad's idea. The words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. David, my ex-husband, Emma's father, the man I'd trusted with shared custody of our child, had put a camera in her bedroom. What do you mean it was Dad's idea? Emma, tell me exactly what happened, and don't leave out a single detail. She was crying now, ugly tears that she wasn't trying to hide or control. He said he was worried about me. About my judgment. He said I was letting you make poor choices, and that he needed to document it for the custody modification. Custody modification. David hadn't mentioned anything about changing our arrangement, which had been working well for 3 years. Emma spent weekdays with me, and weekends with him and Patricia. She seemed happy with the setup, and I'd assumed he was too. What poor choices? What was he talking about? Emma wiped her nose with the back of her hand, a gesture that reminded me so strongly of her as a small child that it broke my heart. You letting me date Jake. You not monitoring my homework closely enough. You working late sometimes and leaving me alone. He said you were being neglectful and that he could get full custody if he had proof. The betrayal was so complete, so overwhelming, that I couldn't process it all at once. My ex-husband had convinced our daughter to participate in what amounted to surveillance of me, disguised as concern for her welfare. He'd made her complicit in violating her own privacy. Emma, do you understand that what your father did was illegal? Putting a camera in a minor's bedroom without the other parent's consent is a serious crime. And asking you to keep it secret makes it worse. But he's my dad, she said, and the confusion in her voice broke something inside me. He said he was protecting me from your bad decisions. He said if I didn't help him, I might end up in a dangerous situation because you weren't paying attention. David had always been manipulative, but this was beyond anything I'd thought him capable of. During our marriage, his control had been subtle, undermining my confidence with comments about my parenting, my career, my appearance. I'd thought the divorce had ended his ability to influence my life. I'd been wrong. How long has the camera been there? 3 months, maybe 4. I'm not exactly sure when he put it in. 3 months, 90 days of my daughter's most private moments, recorded and presumably reviewed by her father and stepmother. 90 days of her changing clothes, sleeping, crying, talking on the phone with friends, being a normal teenager in the one place she should have felt completely safe. Has he shown you any of the footage? Emma's face crumpled. Some of it, he wanted to show me examples of you not being home when you should be, or not checking on my homework, or letting me stay up too late. He said I needed to understand that you weren't being responsible. I felt like I was drowning in the enormity of what David had done. He hadn't just violated Emma's privacy and broken the law, he'd poisoned her against me, made her question my love and care, turned her into a weapon against her own mother. Emma, I want you to listen to me very carefully. Nothing your father showed you represents bad parenting. Working late occasionally to support our family isn't neglect. Trusting you to do your homework because you're responsible isn't negligence. Letting you have a reasonable bedtime for a 17-year-old isn't dangerous. Your father has been lying to you. But the screenshots he showed me. Screenshots, my blood pressure spiked. He'd been taking screenshots of footage from my daughter's bedroom. How many people had seen them? Had he shared them with Patricia, with his lawyer? The violations kept multiplying in my mind like cancer cells. Emma, did he ever show these screenshots to anyone else? Patricia, other family members? His attorney? She hesitated, which told me everything I needed to know. I think Patricia saw some of them. They were on his laptop when I was at their house last weekend, and she was looking at them with him. They were talking about which ones would be most convincing to a judge. Patricia, David's new wife, a woman I'd tried to be civil with for Emma's sake, had been looking at secret recordings of my teenage daughter. The invasion felt so profound that I had to grip the edge of the table to keep from falling over. What did they say about the footage? Emma was sobbing now, the kind of tears that come when someone realizes they've been used. They said you were irresponsible, that you left me alone too much, that you didn't care about my safety or my schoolwork. They said a judge would see that Emma needed more structure and supervision. David's plan was becoming clear, and it was even more sinister than I'd initially realized. He'd planted the camera not just to gather evidence against me, but to create evidence. By recording Emma during normal teenage activities, and then framing my parenting through the lens of neglect, he could build a case that looked damning to an outside observer. A judge seeing footage of Emma doing homework at midnight might conclude I wasn't enforcing bedtime. Video of her talking on the phone instead of studying could suggest I wasn't monitoring her academics. Clips of her alone in her room while I worked late might imply neglect, without context about my job requirements or Emma's maturity level. Emma, I need you to think carefully. Did your father ask you to do anything specific when you knew the camera was recording? Did he coach you on what to say or do? The question seemed to unlock something in her memory, and fresh tears started flowing. Sometimes he would text me when he knew you weren't home, and ask me to call him while I was in my room. He said it would show that I was checking in appropriately, but now I think he just wanted audio of me being alone. The manipulation was breathtaking in its complexity. David had orchestrated scenarios that would look damning on camera, using our daughter as an unwitting performer in his twisted production. How many of Emma's behaviors over the past few months had been influenced by his suggestions? Did he ever ask you to say negative things about me while you were in your room? Not directly, but he would bring up concerns about you during our weekend visits, and then suggest I think about whether I felt safe or well cared for at home. He said it was normal for teenagers to process their feelings by talking to themselves or writing in journals. I could picture it perfectly. David planting seeds of doubt about my parenting, then sending Emma home to wrestle with those manufactured concerns, all while a hidden camera captured her confusion and distress. Any footage of her looking worried or upset could be presented as evidence of emotional neglect. Emma, you are not in trouble. I need you to understand that. You were manipulated by an adult who should have protected you, not used you. But we need to figure out what to do now, and I need to know everything.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
She nodded, wiping her face with a tissue I handed her. There's something else, Mom. Something that's going to make you really angry. At this point, I wasn't sure I had any anger left. The betrayal was so complete that I felt numb, like my emotional circuits had overloaded and shut down. Tell me. The camera isn't just recording, it's transmitting. Dad has been watching live sometimes. Live surveillance. My ex-husband had been watching my daughter in real time in her bedroom for months. The violation was so profound that I couldn't speak for a full minute. How do you know he's been watching live? Because he's texted me about things that just happened. Like if I was upset about something, he'd text within minutes asking if I was okay. Or if I stayed up late, he'd mention it the next day. I thought he was just being a caring dad, but now I realize he was watching. The picture was complete now, and it was more horrifying than I'd imagined. David hadn't just been collecting evidence for a custody case. He'd been voyeuristically monitoring our daughter's daily life, inserting himself into her private moments through technology and manipulation. I picked up the camera, turning it over in my hands like it might reveal more secrets. The device was sophisticated, clearly expensive, not something he'd bought on impulse. This had been planned, researched, executed with careful premeditation. Emma, I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Has your father ever made you feel uncomfortable in any way? Has he ever asked inappropriate questions or made comments about your body or your developing into a young woman? Her eyes widened in shock. No, Mom, nothing like that. I don't think this is about anything sexual. I think he really believes he's protecting me from you. That might have been true, but it didn't make the situation any less serious. Regardless of David's motivations, he'd committed multiple felonies and involved our daughter in illegal surveillance. The fact that he'd convinced himself he was justified made him more dangerous, not less. We need to call Detective Morrison, Emma. What your father did is illegal, and there's no way around that. But what about Dad? What will happen to him? The question broke my heart because it revealed how much Emma still loved and worried about her father, despite everything he'd done to her. She was 17 years old, caught between two parents she loved, discovering that one of them had betrayed her trust in the most fundamental way possible. I don't know, sweetheart, that's not up to us. But Emma, you cannot protect someone who has hurt you, even if you love them. Especially if you love them. Will this mess up college? Will schools find out about this? Emma was a senior, already accepted to her top choice university with plans to study engineering. The idea that David's actions might impact her future made my rage flare back to life. Absolutely not. You are the victim here, Em. You're not going to face any consequences for your father's choices. I stood up, camera still in my hand, and walked to the kitchen drawer where I kept important phone numbers. Detective Morrison answered on the second ring. Detective Morrison, this is Sarah Chen. You helped us with a break-in about 2 years ago. I need to report what I believe of multiple felonies involving illegal surveillance of my minor daughter. Ma'am, are you and your daughter safe right now? Yes, we're at home. But detective, the person who committed these crimes is my ex-husband, and my daughter has been manipulated into keeping his secret. This is going to be complicated. I'll be right over. Don't touch anything else that might be evidence, and don't contact your ex-husband. We'll handle this properly. After I hung up, Emma and I sat in the kitchen waiting for the police to arrive. She looked younger than her 17 years, curled up in the chair with her knees pulled to her chest. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't tell you. I was confused and scared, and Dad made it seem like I was helping protect our family. You have nothing to apologize for, Emma. Nothing. Your father is a grown man who made deliberate choices to break the law and manipulate you. That's not your fault. Are you going to be okay? I mean, with Dad and Patricia and everything that's going to happen? I looked at my daughter, this brave, intelligent, beautiful young woman, who'd been caught in her father's web of manipulation and was still worried about everyone else's welfare. In that moment, I made a decision that would define everything that came next. I'm going to be more than okay, Emma. We both are, and by the time this is over, everyone is going to understand exactly what kind of man your father really is. Detective Morrison arrived with a partner, Detective Lisa Park, and a technician who specialized in digital forensics. They photographed the camera in place before removing it, documented the entire room, and asked detailed questions about who had access to our house and when the device might have been planted. Emma told them everything, her voice steady despite occasional tears. She described David's manipulation, the screenshots he'd shown her, and the live monitoring she'd discovered. The detectives listened without judgment, asking clarifying questions and taking careful notes. Mrs. Chen, Detective Morrison said after they'd finished with Emma, We'll need to examine your daughter's phone and computer to see if there's any evidence of your ex-husband's communications about this surveillance. We'll also need to get warrants for his devices and any cloud storage accounts where the footage might be stored. How long will that take? These cases move quickly once we have probable cause, which we clearly do. We'll have search warrants within 24 hours. In the meantime, I need you both to stay away from your ex-husband. If he contacts you, don't respond. Let us handle all communication. What about Emma's scheduled visit with him this weekend? That's cancelled indefinitely. If he shows up here or tries to contact Emma, call us immediately. After the police left, Emma and I ordered pizza and tried to process what had happened. Neither of us had much appetite, but we needed to do something normal, something that reminded us we were still a family despite everything that had been shattered. Mom, are you going to tell Grandma and Grandpa? David's parents had always been good to me, even after the divorce. They adored Emma and had never taken sides in our split. But this would test their loyalty in ways I couldn't predict. I think they have a right to know what their son has done, especially since it involves their granddaughter. What if they don't believe us? Then we'll know where we stand with them too. Emma nodded solemnly. She was growing up fast, learning hard lessons about the adults in her life, who could and couldn't be trusted. I hated that she had to learn them this way. The next morning, I called in sick to work and spent the day fielding phone calls from detectives, lawyers, and eventually reporters who'd somehow gotten wind of the story. By afternoon, local news vans were parked outside our house, and I had to close all the curtains and unplug the landline. Emma's phone buzzed constantly with messages from friends who'd seen the news coverage. Some offered support, others asked probing questions that felt more like gossip gathering than genuine concern. She finally turned it off and threw it in a drawer. "This is going to follow me forever, isn't it?" she said, staring out the window at the news trucks. "No, baby, this is going to follow your father forever. You're going to be remembered as the brave girl who helped expose a predator, not as a victim." But what if no one believes that? What if everyone just remembers me as the girl whose dad was a creep? I pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo, and made another promise I intended to keep. "Then we'll prove them wrong. We'll show everyone exactly who you are and what you're capable of. And we'll make sure your father never has the chance to hurt another child the way he hurt you." The doorbell rang, interrupting our conversation. Through the peephole, I could see a woman in a business suit holding a briefcase. I opened the door cautiously, leaving the chain lock in place. "Mrs. Chen, I'm Amanda Torres from the district attorney's office. Could I speak with you and Emma about pressing charges against your ex-husband?" The real fight was just beginning. Amanda Torres had the kind of presence that commanded attention without demanding it. She was younger than I'd expected for a prosecutor, maybe early 30s, with sharp eyes that seemed to catalog everything they saw. When I led her into our living room, she immediately noticed Emma's defensive posture and adjusted her approach accordingly. "I understand this is overwhelming for both of you," she said, settling into the chair across from us. "But I want you to know that cases like this are taken very seriously by our office. What your ex-husband did constitutes multiple felonies, and we intend to prosecute to the full extent of the law." Emma shifted beside me on the couch. "What kind of felonies?" "Illegal surveillance of a minor, invasion of privacy, child exploitation, and potentially federal charges if any images were transmitted across state lines or stored on cloud servers. We're looking at significant prison time if he's convicted." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Despite everything David had done, hearing a prosecutor calmly discuss sending Emma's father to prison felt surreal. Emma's face had gone pale, and I could see her struggling with the reality of what was happening. "Mrs. Chen," Torres continued, "I need to ask some difficult questions. Has your ex-husband ever exhibited concerning behavior toward Emma or other children? Any inappropriate comments, boundary violations, or signs of sexual interest in minors?" The question I'd been dreading. I looked at Emma, who shook her head firmly. "No," Emma said, "my dad never did anything like that. This wasn't about sex, or anything gross. He really thought he was protecting me from Mom's bad parenting." Torres made notes on her legal pad. "That may be true, but Emma, I need you to understand that intent doesn't change the legal consequences. Your father installed a hidden camera in a minor's bedroom and monitored you without consent. The law doesn't distinguish between different motivations for that behavior. Emma's eyes filled with tears. So he's going to go to prison no matter what. If he's convicted, yes. The minimum sentence for these charges is 3 years, with potential for much longer depending on what we find on his devices. I felt Emma tense beside me and knew she was about to say something that would break my heart. What if I don't want to press charges? What if I just want this to go away? Torres leaned forward slightly, her expression gentle but firm. Emma, this isn't actually your choice to make. These are crimes against the state, not just against you personally. The district attorney has decided to pursue charges based on the evidence, regardless of your feelings about it. But I'm the victim, shouldn't I get to decide? You're a minor, and in cases involving child exploitation, the state has an obligation to protect you even if you don't want protection. I know that feels frustrating, but it's designed to prevent adults from manipulating children into staying silent about abuse. Emma stood up abruptly. This is insane. My dad made a mistake, and now everyone wants to destroy his entire life over it. He's not a monster. He's just an overprotective father who went too far. I watched my daughter pace across the living room, defending the man who had violated her most intimate space, and felt a familiar mixture of heartbreak and rage. David's manipulation had been so complete that Emma was still protecting him even after learning the truth. Emma, Torres said carefully. I've prosecuted dozens of cases involving hidden cameras in children's bedrooms. In every single one, the perpetrator had what they believed was a good reason. They were protecting their child from a dangerous neighborhood, or monitoring for drug use, or concerned about internet predators. But Emma, the impact on the victim is the same, regardless of the perpetrator's motivation. What impact? I'm fine. I'm not traumatized or damaged. I'm angry that everyone is making such a big deal out of this. Torres pulled a folder from her briefcase. I'd like to show you something if that's okay. These are statements from other teenagers, whose parents installed hidden cameras in their rooms. All of them said the same thing initially, that they were fine, that it wasn't a big deal, that their parents had good reasons. She handed Emma a sheet of paper. This is from a girl named Jessica, whose father installed cameras to monitor her studying habits. She initially defended him too. Emma read silently, her expression gradually changing from defiance to something more complex. When she finished, she looked up with tears in her eyes. What does it say? I asked gently. She says she stopped changing in her room. Started having panic attacks about being watched. Couldn't sleep because she felt like someone was always staring at her. She says it took 2 years of therapy to feel safe in her own space again. Torres nodded.
Emma, you may not feel traumatized now, but violation of privacy often has delayed effects. And regardless of how you feel, your father's behavior was criminal. If we don't prosecute him, what message does that send to other parents who might be considering similar actions? The doorbell rang again, interrupting our conversation. Through the window, I could see a familiar car in the driveway, David's silver BMW, which meant he either hadn't heard about the police investigation yet, or was brazen enough to show up anyway. That's my dad, Emma said, moving toward the door. No. I stood up quickly, blocking her path. Detective Morrison said we shouldn't have any contact with him, but he's probably worried about me. The news trucks have been here all day. Torres was already on her phone, presumably calling the police. Emma, your father coming here while there's an active investigation against him shows incredibly poor judgment. A truly concerned parent would have contacted authorities first. The doorbell rang again, followed by knocking that grew progressively louder. David's voice carried through the door, muffled but clearly agitated. Sarah, open the door. I know you're in there. I need to talk to Emma. I need to explain what really happened. Emma moved toward the door again, and I caught her arm. Emma, no, please trust me on this. But he sounds upset. What if he's not thinking clearly? That's exactly why you can't open that door. The knocking stopped, replaced by David's voice, raised loud enough that the neighbors could probably hear. Emma, sweetheart, if you can hear me, I need you to know that your mother is twisting this whole situation. She's trying to turn you against me, just like she's been trying to do since the divorce. I was protecting you, baby girl. Everything I did was to keep you safe. Torres was speaking quietly into her phone while watching the front door. Emma had gone very still beside me, her face cycling through emotions too quickly for me to track. I can hear the poison in his voice, Emma said suddenly. The way he's blaming you for his choices. When did he start sounding like that? It was a breakthrough moment, the first crack in the wall of loyalty David had built around our daughter. I could see her beginning to understand that his words were calculated, designed to manipulate rather than explain. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. David must have heard them too, because his tone changed from pleading to angry. This is ridiculous, Sarah. You're destroying our family over a misunderstanding. When this is over, when you've had time to think rationally, you're going to regret making such a big deal out of nothing. Torres moved to the window, peering out carefully. He's walking back to his car. Smart man. He doesn't want to be here when the police arrive. But as David's car disappeared down the street, another vehicle pulled into our driveway, a white SUV that I recognized immediately. Patricia, my ex-husband's wife, getting out with what looked like determination written across her face. Oh no, Emma breathed. Patricia's here. This day just kept getting worse. Patricia knocked with the kind of authority that suggested she wasn't going away easily. Mrs. Chen, Torres said, you don't have to talk to her. You can ask her to leave. But before I could respond, Patricia's voice carried through the door. Sarah, I know you're angry, but we need to discuss this situation like adults. There are things you don't understand about David's concerns, and I think if we talk privately, we can work this out without involving lawyers and courts. The audacity was breathtaking. Patricia wanted to negotiate about her husband's criminal behavior like it was a disputed parking ticket. Emma was watching me carefully. Mom, maybe we should hear what she has to say. Maybe there's more to this that we don't know. Torres shook her head firmly. Emma, that's exactly the kind of thinking that keeps victims trapped in cycles of abuse. There is no explanation that makes installing a hidden camera in your bedroom acceptable. But Patricia was married to my dad when he did this. Maybe she tried to stop him. Maybe she has information that could help. Against my better judgment and Torres's obvious disapproval, I opened the door but left the chain lock in place. Patricia, this really isn't a good time. The police are investigating serious criminal charges against David. Patricia looked older than I remembered, stress lines around her eyes that hadn't been there 6 months ago. She was dressed in her usual polished style, but something about her seemed fragile. Sarah, please, just 5 minutes. There are things about David's mental state that you need to understand. This isn't as simple as everyone is making it seem. Her mental state defense. I'd heard this before, during our divorce proceedings, when David's controlling behavior was explained away as anxiety and concern, rather than what it actually was. Torres stepped into view behind me. Ma'am, I'm with the district attorney's office. Any communication about this case needs to go through official channels. Patricia's composure cracked slightly. You don't understand. David has been seeing a therapist for paranoid thoughts about Sarah's parenting. He was convinced that Emma was in danger, that Sarah was neglecting her or exposing her to unsafe situations. The camera wasn't about voyeurism or control. It was about a man who's mentally ill trying to protect his daughter. The manipulation was stunning in its sophistication. Patricia was trying to reframe David's calculated criminal behavior as mental illness, hoping to generate sympathy and reduce consequences. Emma looked confused. Dad's been seeing a therapist. He never mentioned that. Patricia seized on Emma's interest. He didn't want to worry you, sweetheart. But he's been struggling with anxiety about your safety ever since the divorce. When he heard about that boy you're dating, and about your mother working late, he became obsessed with the idea that something terrible was going to happen to you. Torres stepped forward. Ma'am, mental illness is not a defense for installing surveillance equipment in a minor's bedroom. If your husband was genuinely concerned about Emma's welfare, there were legal channels he could have pursued. But you don't understand how his mind works. Patricia continued, her voice taking on a pleading quality. He sees threats everywhere. He's convinced that Sarah is hiding things from him, that Emma is in constant danger. The camera was his way of trying to verify that his fears were unfounded. I felt Emma wavering beside me,
drawn in by Patricia's portrayal of David as a concerned but misguided father rather than a calculating predator. Patricia, I said firmly, if David was having paranoid thoughts about my parenting, the appropriate response would have been to discuss his concerns with me or petition the court for custody modification. Installing a hidden camera was a crime, regardless of his mental state, but he tried to talk to you. Patricia's voice was getting shrill. He tried to express his concerns, and you dismissed them. You made him feel like his feelings about Emma's safety didn't matter. When did David try to discuss concerns about Emma's safety with me? Patricia faltered, clearly not expecting to be asked for specifics. Well, there were several occasions over the past year. Name one. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Patricia glanced at Emma, then back at me, clearly searching for a response that wouldn't reveal the lie. It was during phone conversations about pickup times and schedules. He mentioned being worried about Emma's late nights and her boyfriend. Phone conversations that I would have remembered because they never happened. David and I communicated primarily through text messages about logistics, specifically to avoid the kind of arguments Patricia was describing. Torres was taking notes again. Ma'am, are you saying your husband discussed his intention to install surveillance equipment with you beforehand? No, of course not. I would never have agreed to something like that. So you were aware of the camera after it was installed? Patricia's face went white. I think I should probably call our lawyer before answering any more questions. The admission hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Patricia had known about the camera. She'd been complicit in David's surveillance of Emma, and now she was here trying to manipulate us into dropping charges. Emma stepped back from the door. You knew he was watching me and you didn't stop him. Patricia reached toward Emma through the gap in the door. Sweetheart, it wasn't like that. We were just worried about you. The footage showed that you were safe and happy, which was a relief to both of us. You watched footage of me in my bedroom. Only to verify that you were okay. Only to make sure that the concerns your father had were unfounded. Torres closed her notebook with a sharp snap. Ma'am, I strongly advise you to contact your attorney immediately. You've just admitted to being an accessory to multiple felonies involving a minor. Patricia's composed facade finally crumbled completely. This is insane. We were protecting Emma. We were being responsible parents. And now you're treating us like criminals. You are criminals, Emma said quietly, her voice steady despite her tears. You violated my privacy for months. You made me feel like I was betraying Mom by keeping your secret. You made me question whether I was safe in my own home. How is any of that protecting me? Patricia looked genuinely shocked by Emma's response, as if she'd expected our daughter to be grateful for their surveillance. Emma, you don't understand the pressure your father has been under. The divorce was difficult for him, and seeing you grow up without his daily involvement has been heartbreaking. He just wanted to make sure you were okay. By spying on me in my bedroom. By recording me without permission. By lying to me about his motivations. We never lied to you. Emma's laugh was bitter. You told me he was documenting Mom's bad parenting to protect me. You said he needed evidence for court. You made me believe that helping him spy on our family was the right thing to do. Because it was the right thing. Patricia was crying now, her careful composure completely gone. Your father loves you more than anything in this world. Everything he did was motivated by that love. Love doesn't violate boundaries, Emma said, and I felt a surge of pride at her clarity. Love doesn't make someone feel ashamed for existing in their own space. Love doesn't require lies and secrets and hidden cameras. Patricia looked desperately from Emma to me, clearly realizing that her manipulation wasn't working. Sarah, please. You know David isn't a bad man. He made a mistake, yes, but it came from a place of love and concern. Don't let the legal system destroy him over one error in judgment. One error in judgment. I could feel my anger rising again. Patricia, he installed a camera in our daughter's bedroom and monitored her for months. He involved Emma in deceiving me. He violated every boundary that exists between divorced parents. This wasn't one mistake. This was a sustained campaign of illegal surveillance. But if you press charges, it will destroy his career. He'll lose his law license. We'll lose our house. His reputation will be ruined forever.
The consequences David would face were starting to become real for Patricia, and her desperation was showing. Torres stepped forward again. "Ma'am, those are the natural consequences of committing serious felonies. If your husband was concerned about protecting his career and reputation, he should have considered that before installing surveillance equipment in his daughter's bedroom." Patricia wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "What can we do to fix this? What would it take for you to drop the charges?" The question revealed everything about Patricia's understanding of the situation. She saw this as a negotiation, a problem that could be solved with the right combination of apologies and concessions. "Patricia," I said as gently as I could manage, "there is nothing you can do to fix this. David committed crimes against Emma. The district attorney is prosecuting those crimes. This isn't a civil dispute that can be settled out of court. But Emma could ask them not to prosecute. She could tell them she doesn't want her father to go to prison." Emma looked at Patricia with something that might have been pity. "I can't unwatch the videos he showed me of my own bedroom. I can't unknow that you both thought it was okay to spy on me. I can't unfeel the shame of realizing I helped him betray my own mother." Patricia seemed to deflate at Emma's words. "But he's your father. He loves you. I know he loves me. But love doesn't excuse everything. And I'm starting to understand that the way he loves people might not be healthy." Torres was checking her phone. "The police are 2 minutes away. Ma'am, I strongly recommend that you leave before they arrive." Patricia looked at Emma one more time. "I hope someday you'll understand that we were trying to protect you. I hope you'll forgive us." "Maybe," Emma said, "but not today." After Patricia left, Emma and I sat in our living room processing what had just happened. The confrontation had been emotionally exhausting, but it had also clarified something important. David and Patricia genuinely believed they were justified in their actions. "Mom," Emma said finally, "I think I understand something now. Dad didn't do this because he was confused or mentally ill. He did it because he doesn't think I have a right to privacy from him." That was exactly right, and I was proud of Emma for recognizing it. "He still sees me as his possession instead of as a person. That's why he thought installing a camera was acceptable. That's why Patricia thought they could negotiate their way out of consequences." Emma was growing up fast, learning hard truths about adult relationships and the ways people justified harmful behavior. When the police arrived, they took statements about both David's and Patricia's unexpected visits. Detective Morrison looked concerned about the timing. "Your ex-husband showing up here during an active investigation shows a pattern of disregarding boundaries," he said. "We'll be adding witness intimidation to the charges." Emma asked if Patricia would face charges too. "Potentially," Morrison replied. "Being an accessory after the fact is a serious crime, especially when it involves child exploitation." That evening, Emma and I ordered Chinese food and tried to establish some sense of normalcy. But everything felt different now. The house that had been our sanctuary felt exposed, violated by the knowledge of David's surveillance. "Mom," Emma said as we ate lo mein from takeout containers, "I want to go to therapy, not because I think I'm damaged, but because I want to understand how this happened. How I let him manipulate me into helping him spy on you." "I think that's a great idea," I told her. "And Emma, you didn't let him do anything. He's an adult who used his position as your father to manipulate you. That's not your fault. But I should have known better. I should have realized that what he was asking wasn't normal. Emma, you were a child dealing with an adult who had been grooming you for years to prioritize his feelings over your own instincts. The fact that you eventually saw through his manipulation shows how strong and smart you are." My phone rang. Jenna Morrison, David's mother, calling for the first time since news of the charges had broken. "Sarah," she said, without preamble, "we need to talk." "Hi, Jenna. How are you holding up?" "Not well. David called us this afternoon. He's saying that you're exaggerating the situation, that he was just trying to document concerning behavior for a custody modification." Jenna had always been fair to me, even after the divorce. If anyone in David's family would listen to reason, it would be her. Jenna, David installed a hidden camera in Emma's bedroom and monitored her for months without my knowledge or consent. There's no context that makes that acceptable. He says you were leaving Emma alone too much, that you weren't supervising her properly. Even if that were true, which it isn't, the appropriate response would have been to discuss his concerns with me or petition the court. Installing surveillance equipment was illegal. There was a long pause.
Sarah, I need to ask you something directly. Do you think my son is a sexual predator? The question hung between us like a landmine. Jenna needed to know that her son wasn't what she feared most, but I couldn't minimize the seriousness of his actions. I don't think David's actions were sexually motivated, I said carefully. But I do think they represent a fundamental disrespect for Emma's autonomy and privacy. And I think his willingness to involve her in deceiving me shows a level of manipulation that's deeply concerning. Will you let us see Emma? Before the trial, I mean. She's our granddaughter, and we love her. Emma was listening from the kitchen, having heard her grandmother's name. Let me ask her, I said. Emma took the phone. Hi, Grandma. Yes, I'm okay. No, I don't hate Dad, but I'm really hurt by what he did. Yes, I want to see you and Grandpa, but not if you're going to try to convince me that what Dad did was okay. She listened for a moment, then nodded. Okay. Yes, that sounds good. I love you too. After she hung up, Emma looked relieved for the first time all day. They want to take me to dinner this weekend. They promised not to talk about Dad or the case. They just want to spend time with me. I thought that sounded healthy. David's parents were good people who loved Emma genuinely. They deserved a chance to maintain their relationship with her separate from their son's crimes. That night, as Emma got ready for bed, she stopped in my doorway. Mom, I keep thinking about something Patricia said. About Dad seeing threats everywhere. What if he really does have some kind of mental illness? What if he does? I asked gently. Then I feel sorry for him, but it doesn't change what he did to me. And it doesn't mean I have to forgive him just because he might be sick. That's very wise, Emma. She smiled sadly. I'm learning that love and boundaries can exist at the same time. I can love Dad and still refuse to accept his behavior. As I watched my daughter disappear into her room, the same room where she'd been secretly monitored for months, I felt a complex mixture of heartbreak and pride. Emma was emerging from this crisis stronger and wiser, but she shouldn't have had to learn these lessons this way. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. When I opened it, my blood ran cold. Sarah, this is David. I know you're angry, but you're making a terrible mistake. When this is over and you've destroyed my career and my marriage over a misunderstanding, you'll regret it. Emma needs her father. Don't let your vindictiveness rob her of that relationship. I screenshotted the message and forwarded it to Detective Morrison immediately. David was still trying to control the narrative, still refusing to take responsibility for his actions. The fight was far from over. The trial began on a cold March morning 6 months after I first found that camera in Emma's room. The courthouse buzzed with reporters and curious onlookers, drawn by the salacious details of a father secretly filming his teenage daughter. I held Emma's hand as we walked through the gauntlet of cameras, her face set with determination that still amazed me. David sat at the defendant's table in a navy suit, looking every inch the successful attorney he'd once been. His legal license had been suspended pending the outcome of the trial, and Patricia had filed for divorce 2 months earlier. The golden life he'd built was crumbling piece by piece, but his posture remained defiant. Assistant District Attorney Torres delivered an opening statement that was methodical and devastating. She outlined the timeline of David's surveillance, the manipulation of Emma, and the systematic violation of privacy that had continued for months. The evidence was overwhelming. The camera itself recovered files from David's computer, and Emma's testimony about her father's coaching. David's attorney, a sharp-faced woman named Rebecca Walsh, attempted to portray her client as a concerned father driven to desperate measures by legitimate fears about his daughter's safety. She painted me as an irresponsible single mother who left Emma unsupervised, forced to work late hours that put my child at risk. But the prosecution's case was airtight. Detective Morrison testified about finding over 300 video files on David's home computer, organized by date and meticulously cataloged. The digital forensics expert explained how the camera transmitted footage in real time to David's devices, allowing him to monitor Emma's activities as they happened. Emma's testimony was the most difficult part. She took the stand wearing a simple blue dress, her voice steady as she described her father's manipulation. She explained how David had convinced her that helping him document my parenting failures was protecting our family. She recounted the screenshots he'd shown her, the way he'd coached her to create incriminating scenarios, and the gradual realization that she'd been used as a weapon against her own mother. Yes, she said, when Torres asked if she still loved her father, but loving someone doesn't mean accepting their harmful behavior. I've learned that people can love you and still hurt you, and that real love requires respect for boundaries. David's face crumpled as Emma spoke, tears streaming down his cheeks. For a moment I almost felt sorry for him, watching a man confront the consequences of his choices. But then I remembered the months of violation, the systematic betrayal, and my sympathy evaporated. The defense tried to discredit Emma's testimony by suggesting she'd been coached by me and Torres, that her mature perspective on the situation was suspicious for a teenager. But Emma handled the cross-examination with poise that impressed even the judge. Nobody coached me to feel violated by my father's surveillance, she said when Walsh suggested her testimony was rehearsed. Nobody had to teach me that being secretly recorded in my bedroom was wrong. I figured that out on my own. Patricia was called as a witness, having been granted immunity in exchange for her testimony. She admitted to viewing the recorded footage and helping David organize files that would be most damaging to my parenting. Her testimony revealed the depth of their conspiracy, the way they'd turned surveillance of their daughter into a shared project. She broke down on the stand when Torres asked about her role in coaching Emma to create compromising scenarios. We thought we were protecting her, she sobbed. David was so convinced that Sarah was putting Emma in danger. We thought documenting the truth would help everyone see what we saw, but the truth was that Emma was a normal teenager with a responsible mother who worked hard to provide for her family. David's fears had been manufactured, his evidence manipulated, his entire case built on paranoia and control disguised as concern. David took the stand in his own defense, a decision that surprised everyone including his attorney. He spoke passionately about his love for Emma, his fears about my parenting, and his genuine belief that surveillance was necessary to protect his daughter. I was terrified that something would happen to Emma, he said, his voice breaking. The divorce had limited my ability to be involved in her daily life, and I felt helpless to protect her. The camera was supposed to give me peace of mind, to show me that my fears were unfounded. Torres cross-examined him mercilessly, exposing the contradictions in his testimony. If he'd wanted peace of mind, why had he never discussed his concerns with me directly? If he'd believed his fears were unfounded, why had he continued surveillance for months? If he'd truly been protecting Emma, why had he involved her in deceiving her mother? David's answers became increasingly desperate as Torres dismantled his justifications. He claimed he'd tried to talk to me about his concerns, but couldn't provide specifics. He insisted that the surveillance had been temporary, despite evidence showing he'd been upgrading the camera's capabilities over time. He maintained that involving Emma had been necessary to protect her from my alleged negligence. The jury saw through every excuse. After 3 days of deliberation, they returned guilty verdicts on all charges. Illegal surveillance of a minor, child exploitation, invasion of privacy, and witness tampering. David's face went gray as the verdicts were read, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. At sentencing, Emma read a victim impact statement that left the courtroom in tears. "My father taught me that love requires trust, respect, and honesty," she said, looking directly at David. "Then he violated every one of those principles. He turned my safe space into a stage for his surveillance. He made me complicit in betraying my mother. He taught me to doubt my own instincts about what felt wrong." She paused, wiping away tears but maintaining her composure. "But I've learned something important through this experience. Real love doesn't require surveillance. Real protection doesn't involve deception. Real family doesn't ask you to choose between loyalty and truth. My father may have given me life, but my mother taught me how to live it with dignity and boundaries." The judge sentenced David to 5 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 3. His law license was permanently revoked, and he was ordered to have no contact with Emma until she turned 18 and could decide for herself whether to have a relationship with him. As we left the courthouse, reporters shouted questions about forgiveness and healing. Emma handled them with grace beyond her years. "Forgiveness isn't something you owe someone just because they're family," she told one persistent journalist. "Healing happens when you stop making excuses for people who hurt you and start building relationships with people who respect you." The months following the trial brought unexpected changes. Emma thrived in therapy,
working through the complex emotions surrounding her father's betrayal. She started a blog about teenage privacy rights that gained national attention, turning her painful experience into advocacy for other young people facing similar violations. I returned to teaching with a new perspective on the parent-teacher relationships I navigated daily. I could spot the signs of controlling behavior more easily, the red flags that indicated when concern crossed into manipulation. Emma's relationship with David's parents remained strong. They visited regularly, careful never to defend their son's actions while maintaining their love for their granddaughter. They'd accepted that loving someone sometimes meant acknowledging their capacity for harm.
The house felt different now. Emma had redecorated her room completely, painting the walls lavender and rearranging the furniture to create a space that felt entirely her own. The stuffed elephant, Mr. Peanuts, still held his place of honor, but now he faced outward toward the room, a guardian rather than an observed presence. One evening in late spring, almost a year after the trial, Emma came home from a college preparation meeting excited about her future plans. "I've decided on my major," she announced over dinner, "criminal justice with a focus on digital privacy law. I want to help other families navigate situations like ours." I felt a surge of pride watching my daughter transform her trauma into purpose. She'd taken David's violation of her privacy and turned it into a mission to protect others from similar experiences. That night, as I was cleaning up the kitchen, Emma joined me at the sink. "Mom," she said quietly, "I need to tell you something. I forgive Dad." The statement surprised me. Emma had been working toward this in therapy, but hearing her say it felt significant. "Not because what he did was okay," she continued, "and not because I'm ready to have a relationship with him, but because carrying anger was hurting me more than it was hurting him." I understood the distinction she was making. Forgiveness as a gift to herself, not an absolution for David. "I'm proud of you," I told her, "for everything you've become through this experience." "I learned it from watching you," she said. "You taught me that standing up for yourself isn't about being vindictive or angry, it's about knowing your worth and refusing to accept less than you deserve." 6 months later, Emma left for college with a full scholarship to study law. She'd grown into a young woman who understood that love and boundaries could coexist, that family wasn't just about blood, but about respect and genuine care. David sent a letter on her 18th birthday, his first contact since the trial. Emma read it carefully, then put it away without responding. "Maybe someday," she told me, "when I'm ready to have that conversation on my own terms, but not yet." I respected her decision completely. She'd learned that she didn't owe anyone access to her life simply because they demanded it, even if that person was her father. The camera incident had shattered our family in some ways, but it had also revealed its true foundation. Emma and I emerged stronger, more honest with each other, more aware of our individual worth. We'd learned that real family protects each other's autonomy rather than violating it. Years later, when people asked about the case, I always emphasized the same point. The violation wasn't just about privacy, though that was serious enough. It was about trust, respect, and the fundamental right of every person, including children, to exist without being monitored and judged. Emma graduated law school with honors, and now works for a firm specializing in digital privacy rights. She's married to a kind man who understands her history and respects her boundaries completely. They have a daughter of their own now, a beautiful little girl who will grow up understanding that love means protection, not possession. David was released on parole after serving 3 years. He lives quietly across the country, working as a paralegal since he can never practice law again. He's never attempted to contact Emma directly, though I know from his parents that he follows her career accomplishments from a distance. Sometimes I wonder if he truly understands the magnitude of what he lost when he chose surveillance over trust, control over love. But that's his burden to carry, not ours. Emma's daughter will never know the fear of being watched in her own room, never experience the confusion of being asked to betray one parent's trust for another's approval. She'll grow up in a home where privacy is respected, where love doesn't require surveillance, and where family means safety rather than violation. The camera that destroyed David's life ultimately freed Emma to build her own. Sometimes the worst betrayals reveal the most important truths about who deserves our trust, and who has earned the right to be called family. Looking back, I realized that finding that camera was a gift, though it took years to see it that way. It forced us to confront uncomfortable truths about the people we loved and the relationships we'd accepted without question. It taught us that real love doesn't hide behind surveillance and lies. Most importantly, it showed Emma and me who we really were, two strong women who refused to let anyone, even family, make us small enough to fit their need for control. We chose truth over comfort, boundaries over peace, and dignity over maintaining relationships that required us to diminish ourselves. That choice changed everything, and I've never regretted making it. 5 years after the trial ended, I received an unexpected phone call that would test everything Emma and I had rebuilt. The voice on the other end was familiar yet strained. "Hello, Sarah. This is Patricia." I hadn't spoken to David's ex-wife since her testimony at the trial. She'd disappeared from our lives completely after the divorce, moving to another state to escape the scandal that had engulfed her marriage. "Patricia," I said carefully, "this is unexpected. I know, I've been wanting to call for years, but I wasn't sure how you'd react. I have something important to tell you about David, and I think Emma deserves to know." My stomach tightened. David had been out of prison for 2 years, living quietly in Oregon according to his parents. Whatever Patricia needed to share couldn't be good news. "What is it?" "He's been doing it again. Not the cameras, but the surveillance. His new girlfriend has a teenage daughter, and I found out he's been monitoring her social media, tracking her location through her phone, installing parental control software that records everything she does online." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. David hadn't learned anything from his imprisonment, from losing his career, from destroying his relationship with Emma. He'd simply found new victims for his controlling behavior. "How do you know this?" "The girlfriend contacted me last month. She'd heard about our case through a Google search and reached out when she started noticing red flags. David had convinced her that his previous charges were exaggerated, that you'd blown everything out of proportion because of divorce bitterness." I sat down heavily in my kitchen chair, the same spot where I'd first questioned Emma about the camera years ago. Some people never change, no matter how severe the consequences of their actions. "What did you tell her?" "Everything. I showed her the court records, the police reports, the evidence from the trial. I told her about Emma's testimony and the systematic way David had manipulated everyone involved." She broke up with him immediately and filed a restraining order. Relief flooded through me, followed quickly by sadness for another family torn apart by David's inability to respect boundaries. "Thank you for calling, Patricia. Emma should know about this." "You're right. There's something else, Sarah. Something I never told anyone, not even during the trial." I waited, sensing that whatever she was about to reveal would be significant. David had been planning to expand the surveillance. He'd ordered additional cameras for the living room and kitchen. He wanted to monitor your entire house, not just Emma's bedroom. The only reason he didn't install them was because Leah left him before he had the chance. The scope of David's intended violation was even worse than we'd realized. He'd planned to turn our entire home into his personal surveillance network, watching our every move under the guise of protecting Emma. "Why didn't you tell anyone this before?" "Because I was terrified. I'd already admitted to being complicit in watching footage from Emma's room. If I'd revealed that I knew about plans for more cameras, I might have faced additional charges. I was protecting myself, and I've regretted that cowardice every day since." Patricia's confession added another layer to the betrayal we'd experienced, but it also provided validation. David's behavior hadn't been about genuine concern for Emma's safety. It had been about total control, comprehensive surveillance, the complete violation of our privacy and autonomy. After I hung up with Patricia, I called Emma immediately. She was at work at her law firm, but she answered on the first ring. "Mom, what's wrong? You sound upset." I told her about Patricia's call, about David's new girlfriend and her teenage daughter, about the additional cameras he'd planned to install in our house. Emma listened in silence, and I could hear her breathing change as the implications sank in. "So it was never really about protecting me," she said finally. "It was about his need to control everything around him." "That's right, sweetheart. You were just the excuse he used to justify behavior he wanted to engage in anyway. I feel sorry for that girl. She didn't know what she was getting into with him." The girlfriend did the right thing by researching David's history and reaching out to Patricia. Not everyone thinks to investigate their partner's past legal troubles. Emma was quiet for a moment. Mom, I want to do something about this. I want to make sure other families know what to look for. What do you have in mind? I've been thinking about starting a foundation, something that educates parents and teenagers about digital privacy and the warning signs of surveillance abuse. This call from Patricia confirms that it's needed. That evening, Emma came over for dinner and we spent hours discussing her foundation idea. She'd already been researching similar organizations and had identified gaps in education and support services for families dealing with technological abuse. Within 6 months, Emma had launched the Digital Dignity Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to educating families about privacy rights and supporting victims of technological surveillance. The foundation offered workshops for parents about appropriate monitoring versus abusive surveillance, trained teenagers to recognize boundary violations, and provided legal resources for families navigating similar situations to ours. Emma's first workshop drew over 200 attendees, including parents, teenagers, teachers, and law enforcement officers. She stood at the podium with confidence that still amazed me, sharing her story with vulnerability and strength. Surveillance disguised as protection is still violation, she told the audience. Real safety comes from communication, trust, and respect for boundaries, not from hidden cameras and secret monitoring. The foundation's work caught national attention when Emma testified before Congress about the need for stronger digital privacy protections for minors. She advocated for legislation that would require parental consent from both parents before installing surveillance equipment in shared custody situations. David's parents attended Emma's congressional testimony, sitting in the gallery with tears streaming down their faces. Afterward, they approached us in the hallway. "We're so proud of the woman you've become," Jenna told Emma, hugging her tightly. "Your strength and grace through all of this has been extraordinary." "I just hope some good can come from what Dad did," Emma replied. "If sharing my story prevents other families from going through this, then maybe it wasn't all for nothing." Later that year, Emma received an unexpected letter from David. He'd somehow learned about her foundation work and wanted to express his support, though he remained bound by the court order prohibiting direct contact with her. Emma read the letter carefully, then shared it with me and her therapist before deciding how to respond. "He says he's proud of me," she told me. "He says he hopes the foundation helps other families avoid the mistakes he made. But Mom, he still doesn't take full responsibility. He calls what he did mistakes instead of crimes. Some people can acknowledge their actions without truly understanding their impact," I replied. "Your father may never fully comprehend what he put you through." Emma decided not to respond to David's letter, maintaining the boundaries she'd established years earlier. She wasn't ready for any relationship with him, and might never be, despite his apparent support for her advocacy work. The foundation continued to grow, establishing chapters in 12 states and helping hundreds of families navigate privacy violations and surveillance abuse. Emma became a recognized expert on digital rights for minors, consulting with tech companies, law enforcement agencies, and family courts. One afternoon, while reviewing applications for the foundation's Victim Support Fund, Emma came across a case that stopped her cold. A teenage girl in Oregon had discovered her stepfather monitoring her through hidden cameras and tracking software. The stepfather's name was David Chen. Emma called me immediately, her voice shaking. "Mom, he's done it again. Dad has another victim, and this time the family needs our help." The girl's mother had filed for divorce and pressed charges, but the legal process was complex and expensive. The family needed both emotional support and financial assistance to pursue justice. Emma personally flew to Oregon to meet with the family, offering the foundation's resources and her own expertise. She testified as an expert witness in the case, helping the prosecution demonstrate the pattern of David's behavior and the long-term impact of surveillance abuse on young victims. David was convicted again, receiving a longer sentence due to his previous record. As he was led away in handcuffs, he looked directly at Emma in the courtroom gallery. For a moment their eyes met, and Emma later told me she saw something that might have been genuine remorse. "But it doesn't matter," she said afterward. "Remorse without change is just self-pity. He had years to examine his behavior and choose differently. Instead, he found new victims. The second conviction validated everything Emma had been advocating through her foundation work. David's repeat offense proved that surveillance abuse was rarely an isolated incident, that perpetrators who justified violating one child's privacy would likely victimize others. Emma's foundation launched a national campaign, called Once a Violator, educating families about the importance of researching potential partners' backgrounds and recognizing red flags for controlling behavior. The campaign featured testimonials from multiple families who'd encountered David, showing the pattern of manipulation and surveillance that followed him from relationship to relationship. Now, 8 years after finding that first camera in Emma's room, our family has built something beautiful from the ashes of betrayal. Emma's foundation has helped over 3,000 families, prevented countless privacy violations, and changed legislation in 15 states. Emma married her college boyfriend in a small ceremony, surrounded by chosen family, people who'd proven their loyalty and respect through years of genuine support. David wasn't invited, nor did he attempt any contact around her wedding. Their first child, a son they named James, will grow up understanding that privacy is a fundamental right, that love doesn't require surveillance, and that real protection comes from communication and trust rather than hidden monitoring. I retired from teaching last year to work full-time with Emma's foundation, using my experience as an educator to develop curriculum about digital citizenship and privacy rights. Together we've created something that transforms trauma into advocacy, pain into purpose. Sometimes people ask if I regret how everything unfolded, if I wish I'd handled David's surveillance differently to preserve Emma's relationship with her father. The answer is always no. Emma deserved a father who respected her autonomy and dignity. Since David couldn't be that person, she was better off learning to recognize and reject relationships that required her to sacrifice her boundaries. The camera that David planted in Emma's room was meant to control and manipulate us. Instead, it freed us to build authentic relationships based on mutual respect and genuine care. It taught us that family isn't defined by blood or legal obligation, but by consistent actions that demonstrate love, support, and recognition of each other's inherent worth. Emma's story has reached millions of people through her advocacy work, showing other families that they don't have to accept violation disguised as protection. Her courage in sharing her experience has prevented countless other children from enduring similar betrayals. David remains in prison, where he'll stay for at least another decade. His parents visit him occasionally, but they've built their primary relationship with Emma and their great-grandson. They've learned that loving someone sometimes means acknowledging their capacity for harm, and choosing to protect their victims rather than their victimizer. The house where Emma grew up has been sold, and I've moved closer to her family. But sometimes I drive past the old neighborhood, remembering the woman I was before I found that camera, before I learned that standing up for what's right sometimes costs everything you thought you wanted but gives you everything you actually need. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up, just click and check them out.